Hi everyone, so I'm Olivier. I'm a software engineer at IBL, and I have a background in signal processing. So to me, it was very natural to go towards a bit spike sorting and electrophysiology. And today I'm going to talk about the inspection of the raw data. And I'm going to try to convince you that it's important to look at raw data, and I'm going to explain why. So I'm going to show a few examples at first of things we discovered with looking at raw data. And after, I'm going to go over some pre-processing on how to prepare the data before we put into the spike sorting phase. And I'm going to illustrate this with raw data displays. So a bit of background on what I'm going to show and why it's important is that this is the scale of the recordings we've done at the IPL. I'm going to emphasize the diversity of the recordings of the brain regions that we recorded. And if we look at some raw data about those recordings, you can see that according to where the probe was located in the brain, we get very different electrophysiological signatures. So here we get 3 different displays. And you need to get used to those displays because I'm going to show them throughout the talk here. So this is the channels on the y-axis. This is the 384 channels of the NP1 probe. And this is time. And here we are looking at more or less 50 milliseconds of data. All of the blurbs you can see in dark, here are spikes actually, and they are tagged here with little dots. And as you can see, the shape of the spikes, their frequency, their relationships with other spikes is really different where you are in the brain. So on the right here, we're in the cortex, in the visual cortex on the top. In the thalamus here, you see the spikes are much smaller and much more frequent than in cortex. Here, this is the cerebellum where you can see the spatial signature is very wide, those spikes. And here, this is the midbrain. So I would say that's one reason to look at the raw data is that if you see only spike trains when you try to decode, if you look at them on the raw data, they can spike can do very different things depending on where you are. The second reason I think it's important to look at the raw data is I'm going to show examples of rasters here. So this is the spike density, so each dot represents the number of spikes that we've counted at this depth. And the depth is the depth of the probe, around 4 millimeters over 500 seconds over a full recording. And here we can see in the middle that something very weird starts to happen. And if you think that this is due to an artifact, you would be right. This is actually, if you look at the raw data, you can clearly see here that the raster is showing that the raw data here is correct, while here it's quite good. What is happening here is that it's a drying of the saline solution that creates a lot of noise in this area. So by adding more solution here, they could fix the problem and continue the recording. And this is so you may. The conclusion may be that the non-stationarity seen on the raster is indicative of a raw data quality problem. And here we see a huge non-stationarity in the middle of the session. And we could think that the raw data is wrong behind this. But actually, if we look at the raw data on those examples, we can see that on both cases, even if they look very different, the raw data quality is quite good. We can see that indeed, the spiking activity on the left is way less than it is in the right. So whatever this is, it may be due to behavior, may due to brain state, may due to too many things, but it's not due to the raw data quality or to a spike sorting failure. In this case, both are operating quite well. And, so here it was indicative, the raw data is indicative of what's going on. So now that I've explained a bit why it's important, I'm going to explain a bit how we prepare the raw data to enter the spike sorting. I'm going to describe the pre-processing steps we are taking at IBL before starting the clustering phase of the spike sorter. And those are the steps that we are taking. So first, rephasing the channels, then we do channel detection. Then a spatial filter. The spatial filter is known as common average referencing sometimes, or it could be a spatial filter, but the idea is the same. And then we do some saturation detection and mitigation, and at last we do some quality metrics. So I'm going to go over the rephasing. The rephasing is something that it's done also in CatGT, in Spike GLX. And I'm going to explain why it's important. So here we can see very small amount of raw data, 2 milliseconds almost, with a spike here. And we can see this band is noise that's from ground loop noise. And as you can see, if you zoom at this scale, you can see that the channels are not all synchronized. And this is due to the way that the neuropixel acquires the data. And if you try to do a straight spatial filter on this, you will have a lot of noise. You will have a lot of noise because the channels are not aligned. And if you know the alignment of the channel, you can perform interpolation. In frequency domain, it's a bit better. And to align the channels before you apply some kind of spatial filter that we see on D. So the difference between D and E is whether or not you rephase the channels before applying this correction. So that's one thing to take care of, and it applies to NP1 and NP2. The second part is to detect the bad channels. So here, as we can see, this is a raw recording on the right, and to detect the bad channels, we have three metrics that we apply. We try to detect the dead channels, we try to detect the noisy channels, and we try to detect the channels that are outside of the brain. Here I've taken the example of the dataset that we've provided for the assignments. And in this case, there is only one channel that is seen as noisy. It's the reference channel, channel 191 for the Pixel Pro. Having this display is interesting because you can see which is the metric that is failing for the bad channel, and you can adjust the threshold if you think it's So the bad channel detection, what impact does it have? So this is a heavily noise. This is quite noisy data. You can see, and you have a lot of noisy channels and dead channels in this data. You don't want to launch this into the spike sorter. So this is after the channel detection. This is more or less what you're going to input to the spike sorter, a much cleaner input. The next step, I'm going to discuss a bit the saturation, the spatial filter. So the spatial filter is common average referencing. I'm going to show examples that are quite drastic on the raw data, where you would think that there is nothing or it's unrecoverable. But if you align the channels and you detect the bad channels, you can do some kind of common average referencing and recover the signal of the underneath. So this is before, and this is after the distracting. Before, after, this is the same data. Then another drastic example here where it's very high amplitude noise, and you can recover the signal that is behind the noise here. So those are success cases of this destriping. I think what's important is to look at the failure cases for you if you're doing some experiments. The failure case of this destriping is the saturation. So here we can see something that doesn't look as bad necessarily as what we had before, because we can see the spikes underneath. But if you look under after this striping, you can see that at some point it's impossible to take out the noise. And what is happening here is that the signal is saturating. We are saturating the probe, and we cannot record there. And this is creating artifacts. So here an idea is the problem of the saturation is that it's going to induce false detection by the spike sorter, at least by kilo sample we are using. And the problem is that having those false detection is going to impair the clustering. So I'm going to show that if we mute this saturation, you can recover more spikes in the signal band. So after a mute, you can see that some green dots are appearing. So not only is there an impact of detecting bad spikes, it prevents the detection of the good spikes. So this is to be taken out as well. So you can, a way is to mute a bit those samples after the pre-processing, so you can at least spike on this and recover what is next. This is the raster plot corresponding to this recording, where we can see those are task events in green, and you can see the spurious events there with spike detection. And with this mitigation of the saturation, you can see that the spike sorting has way less wrong events detected. Now I'm going to close with the raw data metrics. And it's one thing we compute that is not output by a conventional spike sorter, but we think it's important. And we compute the spectral densities, the RMS, the channel labels, which are the round and back channels. And we can use it if we have doubts about a recording to detect anomalous recording. We can also use it for alignment of the probe, as Mayo is going to show a bit later. So here is an example of the RMS of the IP band. There is some future work to be done here because we still don't have an automatic way to flag an anomalous recording. And this is something we would like to have, especially when you start the acquisition real time. If it can tell you that the quality of your recording is questionable, it may be better to stop and, as Carolina said, to go and check the wiring or if anything is wrong. So you've seen I did not emphasize the tool that I recommend using for looking at the raw data. This is what we use. We use something that is called rephasing. It's in Python and PyQt. You can use it offline to look at the data. Here we have an example on the IP band and the LFP band. And this is the object of the assignment that I'm going to show is going to be to use this software. However, I don't think the tool matters as much as looking at your data and whatever floats your boat. If it's SpyJLX, if it's OpenIFs that have been shown before, I think any way to look at your data is good. As long as you look at your data, I think that's the big takeaway of this tool. I'm going to leave it from there, and I'm going to hand the floor to Alessio